I want you to meet Jim Foley.
On the morning in which we were captured, April 5th, it was one of those mornings where we decided we were going to go out and spend a night with the rebels. Now, this wasn't necessarily a dangerous or suicidal proposition. It was sort of the idea that you were going to encamp with them and get some flavor, you know, over a period of 24 hours, something that, you know, of course, I had done in Afghanistan with U.S. troops in a much more organized fashion.
That was Jim Foley in 2011, reporting to a Marquette University audience his experience of being kidnapped, an American journalist in Bragaga, Libya. One of his team members of the kidnapping did not survive. Luckily, Foley and his crew were released after 44 days in captivity. Foley returned home to the United States, and in the United States, but later, after returning home, he continued to follow his passion for journalism, and he returned to the Middle East. And in Syria, on November 22nd, 2012, he was kidnapped a second time, this time by ISIS. 2 years later, after unthinkable torture, on August 19, 2014, ISIS terrorists uploaded a video to YouTube titled "A Message to America." In the video, a masked man executes, decapitates Foley. The actual act is not shown, but the before and after were made clear in very graphic detail. The unthinkable and horrific video rocked our country and any decent human being. Years later, James Foley's mother, Diane Foley, met with one of the terrorists responsible for his son's murder. The two spoke 3 times, each time for hours. It was in federal courthouse across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. Today, Diane Foley releases her book, American Mother. In it, she writes about those face-to-face meetings with one of her son's killers, and also writes about working with the Obama administration and the United States government to free her son. My opinion, maybe not Jim's mother's opinion, but my opinion, after following closely Jim's kidnapping since the very beginning and the aftermath, is that our government showed a shameful disregard for American Jim Foley and his family and friends. Diane Foley joins me. Nice to see you, Diane.
Same here, Fred.
I've read the book, you know, it's like 10 years ago. I remember sitting in your living room in New Hampshire.
You did.
The unthinkable.
I know. 10 long years. And some things are better. I mean, more than 100 U.S. nationals have come home since 2014. So those people would not have necessarily come home. So we're doing better, but the challenge is huge. It's huge, been huge for our foundation. Every day, a hostage family calls us.
You actually sat down with one of the executioners, essentially. Mm-hmm. Why did you do that?
Because Jim would have wanted me to. He would not have wanted me to be afraid. And knowing Jim, he would have wanted me to hear him out. Because Jim worked with a lot of kids who had tough upbringings.
Which you talk about in the book, you write about in your book. Jim, I mean, he was a remarkable young man.
Yeah, Jim worked with a lot of ex-felons and felons in the Cook County Jail and such. Jim would have wanted me to hear him out, but as a mom, I wanted him to know who Jim was too, you know, and hoped he might give us some information about where they were killed or something like that.
Did he apologize to you?
He expressed remorse several times.
But that was only, I mean, in reading your book, though, it seemed like he only cared about his own kids wouldn't see him because he was in prison.
Well, some of that's human. But he did express remorse for what our family had gone through several times, and wrote me several letters expressing remorse, too. Never remorse for what he'd done. He maintained that he was doing what a soldier would do in war, and I think he really believed that.
Did you forgive him? Because I must say, I do not. And I mean, and you're in a much more painful and direct position than I am. But after seeing your family and following this case for a year and seeing everything, I do not. I do not forgive him.
He did not ask for forgiveness. I want to challenge our government and the American people to continue to prioritize the return of innocent Americans and to face the challenge that this is a national security threat. More and more countries like Russia, as you know, are targeting Americans, sometimes just pinning charges on them, augmenting any possible charges.
You know, the thing that you write about in your book, and I just stated in my opinion when I introduced it, I'm shocked at how you got such a runaround by our government. I'm shocked at all the phone calls you made where they seemed to give you the runaround, where they told you to be quiet, hope things would happen. Other countries are paying ransoms. They were getting their people back, and I realize there's no perfect formula. But I'm shocked at the way you were treated throughout this.
Greta, it still continues to some extent because the numbers are huge, and even though we have this hostage enterprise, funds haven't been adequately allocated. Nonprofits like ours work on a shoestring trying to help families. So there's still a huge need. And
in fact, you have the James Foley Foundation, and you can /donate, where people can help people. Like we've done Jimmy Wilgus, who is a musician from New Jersey who's rotten in a prison in Russia. Nobody pays much attention to Jimmy.
Well, we've talked to Jimmy's family. We tried what we can to help. So many of these families are in this gray zone of they're not designated as wrongfully detained, and yet they're being held, often on trumped-up charges.
You know what I was also struck about reading the book is how you weave throughout it your faith. And I mean, you know, how important your faith has been throughout this.
Essential, Greta. I wouldn't even be sitting here without my faith in a loving and merciful God, and the goodness of people like yourself and others who remember Jim, and in your goodness, try to make things better. Try to challenge our country and all of us to do better.
And you know, and I applaud you for that. It's a great book. I applaud that you're trying to help others. I unfortunately remain so bitter, having sat in that living room with you 10 years ago and not knowing what to say to you and your husband, because you know, it's still unthinkable to me.
God willing, we can continue to prioritize the return of our brave Americans who are held captive around the world, and to work on deterrence, because we must deter the practice of taking human beings and holding them as political pawns.
Well, as I say, you're a bigger person than I am. Diane, very nice to see you. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope people read the book. It's a great book, and I hope they donate to the foundation. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Greta.
We'll be right back.